What if one choice could shatter everything you've built? Laura, a wealthy, high-powered businesswoman, was rushing to an important meeting until a beggar with a baby caught her eye. On a cold, rainy street corner, their gazes locked, and suddenly time seemed to stop. Should she help, or ignore it and keep moving? It was a decision that could change her life forever, because what started as an act of kindness could unravel her perfect world. Would she risk it all for someone she barely knew? Before we start the story, comment below which city you are watching from. Enjoy the story.
The sound of heels clacking against the pavement echoed through the empty streets. Laura was late again. The tall, powerful woman with sleek, jet-black hair and a tailored suit dashed past the morning crowd, her briefcase in one hand, phone in the other. She had an important meeting, one that could change everything. A quick glance at her watch confirmed what she already knew. She was running out of time. 5 minutes, she muttered to herself. 5 minutes and I'm done. No more chances. No more opportunities. Her high heels clicked on the rain-slicked street as the rain started coming down harder, the drops hitting her face like needles. Laura barely noticed. She had made it this far. Every step, every decision, every sacrifice had led her here. A millionaire by 35, running a multinational company, admired by some, envied by others. But deep down there was always that nagging feeling. Was it worth it? Her life, filled with meetings, deals and endless phone calls, felt like a hamster wheel. Success had come at the expense of so much. The friendships, the relationships, the years spent chasing an image of perfection. None of it had felt fulfilling. Not lately anyway. As she neared the corner of the street, she saw the bus pull away from the stop, but she didn't flinch. There was no time for public transportation anymore. She had people for that. Her driver would be waiting around the corner. It was just another part of the job. But then something stopped her. Something caught her attention. She slowed her pace, eyes shifting to the far side of the street. Through the rain and fog, she saw a figure, a woman standing by the curb with a baby bundled up in rags. The woman's face was pale, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. She held the baby close, the child's tiny face pressed against her chest. A pitiful sight. The woman's hand trembled as she held a cardboard sign that read, "Please help. A mother's last hope." Laura froze. For a moment she didn't know what to do. The rain kept coming down in sheets, drenching the woman and child, who stood in a place no one seemed to notice. No one but Laura. How could anyone ignore that, she thought. But she quickly shook her head. There was no time for distractions. She had a meeting. She had a legacy to build, a future to secure. But why couldn't she stop looking? Why did the woman's face haunt her as she stood there, a stranger in the storm? For a moment, Laura's mind raced. She was so used to walking past these scenes. She had built walls that shielded her from the harsh realities outside her perfectly curated life. In the boardrooms, she was a force to be reckoned with. But out here, standing on the wet streets, there was a vulnerability she couldn't deny. She could just keep walking. Pretend she hadn't seen them. Pretend the world didn't need saving. After all, wasn't she late for the most important meeting of her career? But the little voice inside her mind grew louder. What if this is your last chance to do something meaningful? Laura shook her head, dismissing the thought. Her life was filled with things that mattered. She had made decisions that were logical, sensible, decisions that built her empire. But there was something about the woman's eyes. That desperation, the overwhelming sense of loss and helplessness, it called out to Laura in a way she hadn't expected. She felt an ache deep within her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Compassion. The word seemed foreign now, as if it belonged to another person, someone she used to know before the world turned into numbers and profits. Laura's phone buzzed in her hand, snapping her back to reality. It was her assistant. "Laura, are you on your way? The CEO is waiting for you." The world was calling her, demanding her attention. But then the beggar's eyes found hers and Laura felt her breath catch. She could hear the soft wail of the baby muffled by the storm. How could I walk away from this? Laura wondered, her heart racing. It was just a few minutes, wasn't it? Just a few minutes before everything would change. But she had a legacy to uphold. She had worked so hard to build everything that she couldn't let a small, fleeting moment derail it. Yet, as if the universe was trying to force her hand, a thought crossed her mind. What if this was her moment to change everything? Laura stopped, her heels barely making a sound on the wet ground. She stood still, not moving, not breathing. Could she walk away? Could she really ignore that woman, that child? Laura closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment of weakness. And when she opened them again, she saw the beggar looking directly at her, as though waiting for her to decide. Her face was like a mirror, reflecting the decision that Laura had to make. With a shaky breath, Laura began to move toward her. For the first time in a long time, the decisions she made now felt different. She wasn't just another billionaire rushing through life. She was a human being, vulnerable, uncertain, and undeniably changed. Laura slowly approached the beggar, her heels sinking into the wet pavement with every step. The sound of the rain pounding against the ground seemed to grow louder in her ears as she moved closer, drowning out the world around her. The woman, drenched and trembling, glanced up at Laura as she drew near. There was a brief moment where neither of them spoke. The woman's eyes, wide with fear and hope, locked onto Laura's. "Are you okay?" Laura found herself asking, her voice shaking despite herself. The question felt so out of place coming from someone who was always in control, always commanding the room. But now, standing in front of this broken soul, she felt small, vulnerable. The beggar didn't answer immediately. She just looked at Laura, blinking as if trying to make sense of the situation. Laura could feel the weight of her gaze. It wasn't pity she saw in the woman's eyes, it was desperation. A mother's desperation. I need something," the beggar finally whispered. Her voice was fragile, barely audible over the sound of the rain. She looked down at her baby, whose tiny face was scrunched up in the cold. "My baby, she needs warmth, food, anything." The words hit Laura like a punch to the gut. She felt a surge of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, an ache that cut deeper than the storm raging around them. Laura's heart pounded in her chest as she knelt down slightly, her eyes locked onto the baby's face. The child was so small, so innocent, so helpless. Her mind raced. This wasn't her world. She didn't know how to fix this. She wasn't equipped to handle these kinds of problems. She had built a life from strategy and ambition, not from caring. But there was no denying the truth. The truth that her world of high-rise buildings, endless meetings, and luxury cars seemed so far removed from the suffering of the streets. And here she was, staring directly at that suffering. The beggar's plea pierced through all of Laura's carefully constructed barriers. "What do you need?" Laura finally managed to ask, her voice still soft, tentative. She wasn't sure if she was asking out of genuine concern, or if she was simply too stunned by the encounter to say anything else. The beggar looked up again, her lips quivering. "Please, anything. Just help." Laura's mind was spinning. The practical side of her brain screamed at her to move on, to continue her path. The meeting was waiting. The future of her company was at stake. She could not let this moment derail everything she had worked for. But as she stood there, frozen, unable to turn away, another voice, the voice of her humanity, whispered, "This is what matters. This is what's real. This is the chance to make a difference." In that moment, everything in Laura's life seemed to converge. The decades of ambition, the sleepless nights spent at the office, the broken relationships, and the empty victories. None of it seemed to matter now. Not in the face of a mother and child, stranded in the rain, with nothing but each other. Laura glanced down at her hand, still holding her phone, buzzing with reminders about her meeting. The words on the screen seemed so insignificant. Is this really my life? She wondered, her grip tightening around the phone. The beggar shifted uneasily, holding her baby tighter as if afraid that Laura might turn away. The child whimpered and the sound tore at Laura's heart. For a second she hesitated. Could she really step away just like everyone else? Could she dismiss them as a blip in her busy, glamorous world? No. Without thinking further, Laura reached into her purse. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a large sum of money, more than she would usually give. She had to do something. Anything. As she handed the beggar the cash, their fingers brushed. A strange spark of connection passed between them. It was as if, in that brief touch, Laura understood something profound. Something that had eluded her for so long. I hope this helps, Laura said, her voice faltering. She wished she could do more. The beggar took the money, her hands shaking. But before she could say anything, the child cried out louder. I need help. Please, just a place to stay. Anything. I don't want my daughter to die on these streets. The desperation in her voice broke through all of Laura's defenses. Laura's eyes widened as the weight of the woman's words hit her. She looked at the baby again, so fragile, so innocent. A part of her wanted to look away, to pretend that this was just another sob story. But another part of her, one she hadn't heard in a long time, wanted to do something. Before she knew it, she was speaking. Come with me, Laura said, her voice low and firm. You and your baby. I'll help you. Just get in my car. We'll get you both out of here. The beggar blinked as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. But her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Laura felt the weight of her decision. She wasn't just handing over money. She was opening a door to something unknown. A commitment. Thank you, the beggar whispered, as if she didn't know whether to believe it herself. As Laura turned toward the car, the rain still falling in torrents, a single thought kept echoing in her mind. This was it. This moment would change everything. The rain had intensified, a cold, unforgiving downpour that made the world feel smaller. Laura's heels clicked against the wet pavement as she moved closer to the woman with the baby. She couldn't quite explain why she had stopped. Time had been ticking away, every second a reminder of her upcoming meeting. But now, standing in front of this woman, the world felt still. Maya, her face pale and weathered, shifted the child in her arms, the baby's cries muffled by the storm. Laura could see the baby's tiny hands wrapped around the thin fabric of her mother's coat. The child's eyes were closed, no doubt from exhaustion, but Laura could still feel the weight of the tiny, fragile life in front of her. Maya caught her gaze and didn't look away. It was as if she were seeing right through Laura, and for the first time in years, Laura felt exposed. Are you cold? Laura asked, unsure why the words came out. She wasn't one to ask such things. Not in the world she occupied, not when she was always in control. But there was something in the way Maya stood there, holding that child, that made Laura's well-practiced indifference waver. Maya looked down at the baby and then back at Laura. Colder than I've ever been, she replied, her voice soft, yet carrying an undeniable strength. But this little one keeps me warm. She's all I have left. Laura's breath hitched. She didn't know what to say. She had heard stories of people falling from grace, of lives shattered by circumstances beyond their control, but this felt different. Maya's pain was raw, real, and it mirrored something Laura had buried deep within herself. For a moment, they stood in silence, the only sound being the heavy rain. Laura found herself struggling with her thoughts. She was a successful woman, a millionaire by 35, accustomed to power, to control. Her life was a series of calculated moves, carefully curated moments. But right now, standing in front of Maya, everything felt out of place. Why are you here? Laura asked, her voice trembling slightly. It wasn't judgmental. It was more of a question she had asked herself, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Why was she standing here, asking these questions when she should be running to her meeting? Maya's expression softened, but there was a hint of something that Laura couldn't quite place. Where else would I be? She replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied Laura. I could ask you the same question. Why are you standing here? You could walk away just like everyone else. You could pretend you didn't see me. Laura flinched as if struck by an unseen hand. She had to admit, she was used to ignoring the world's problems. She was so focused on climbing higher, on achieving more, that she had allowed herself to be numb to suffering. Maya was a reminder of everything Laura had chosen to overlook. The painful realities of the world beyond her high-rise offices, her designer clothes, her privileged life. I don't know, Laura admitted, her voice faltering. She had never let herself question her decisions like this before, but now it was impossible to look away. I'm just late. I have a meeting. A big one. A meeting, Maya echoed, her eyes narrowing with an almost amused skepticism. And that's more important than the person standing in front of you, huh? Laura's stomach twisted. The words stung more than she expected. She had spent so much of her life making excuses, telling herself that everything she did was for a greater purpose. But standing here looking at Maya and her baby, the excuse sounded hollow. I'm sorry, Laura muttered, unsure if she was apologizing for the situation or for her own thoughts. She reached into her purse, her fingers trembling as she pulled out a few bills and handed them to Maya. Take this, please. Maybe it will help. Maya looked at the money, her gaze distant for a moment. Then, slowly, she placed the bills into her pocket without a word. It wasn't the gesture Laura expected. She had given money many times before. She had thought that would make a difference, that it would absolve her of the guilt she felt. But Maya's response made Laura question everything she had believed about charity, about what it meant to truly help. Maya took a small step closer, her eyes never leaving Laura's. You think that will fix anything? Her voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it felt like a punch to Laura's chest. Laura recoiled, caught off guard by the harshness in her voice. What do you mean? Maya didn't flinch. Money doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve this. She gestured to the baby in her arms, and Laura's gaze followed the movement. The child was small and fragile, a vulnerable human being whose future was uncertain. The weight of that uncertainty hung heavily in the air. Laura looked at Maya, then at the baby, and for the first time in years she felt something stir inside her, something deep and unsettling. I didn't choose this life, Maya continued. I didn't choose to be here, holding my child in the rain with nothing but a sign to show for my life. But I'm here. And I'm surviving. And you? Maya's voice trailed off, but her eyes stayed fixed on Laura. You could choose differently. You could choose to see me see her. Laura stood frozen in place, the words Maya had spoken echoing in her mind like a loud, unrelenting drumbeat. She could feel the weight of Maya's gaze on her, an uncomfortable reminder that she had been living a life of avoidance, a life where everything was neatly compartmentalized and distant. There was no more running away. Not from Maya, not from the truth that was slowly rising to the surface. I don't know what you want me to do, Laura said, her voice shaking slightly. The storm raged on, its fury seeming to match the turmoil inside her. She had never been this vulnerable, this unsure. Everything she had built, her empire, her status, her carefully crafted identity, seemed so fragile in this moment. Maya raised an eyebrow. I'm not asking for your pity, Laura, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. What I want is for you to stop pretending like you have everything figured out, like your money and your power can make you invincible. I've been where you are. I used to think the same way. Laura's chest tightened as Maya's words pierced through her, and for a brief moment she saw flashes of her own life. She had been that woman once. Driven, obsessed with success, convinced that her worth was tied to the numbers in her bank account. She had worked so hard to distance herself from vulnerability, from the pain that came with being human, that she had forgotten how to connect with others. And now, in front of Maya, she was being forced to confront it all. Don't you want to fix this? Laura asked, the question falling from her lips almost involuntarily. Don't you want more for your baby? More than this life? Maya smiled softly, but it wasn't the smile of someone who had given up. It was the smile of someone who had learned to accept what life had dealt her, someone who had found strength in the struggle. I want more, Laura. Of course I do. But that doesn't mean I can't be grateful for what I have. My daughter is alive. She is here with me. And as long as I'm breathing, I'll find a way to make it work. She paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Then she looked at Laura with a sharpness that made her take a step back, almost as if she could see into Laura's soul. You're looking for something, aren't you? Maya continued. You came here to get away from your problems. But you don't get to escape that easily. Laura opened her mouth to respond, but the words stuck in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was looking for answers, or just an excuse to feel better about herself. She had always believed that her success was the answer to everything. But now, standing in front of Maya, she wasn't so sure. Maybe, Laura whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Maya's eyes softened for a moment, and for the first time since they had met, Laura saw the human being beneath the surface. The woman who had endured pain, loss, and hardship but who was still standing. You don't have to know everything, Maya said, her voice gentle but firm. Sometimes you just have to be present. You have to open your eyes, open your heart, and see the world as it really is. It's messy, it's painful, but it's also beautiful. And you don't have to have it all figured out to make a difference. Laura felt a tear slip down her cheek, though she quickly wiped it away, not wanting Maya to see her weakness. But it was too late. She could feel the cracks in her armor widening, the walls she had spent years building slowly crumbling away. And in their place was something unfamiliar, vulnerability. The storm raged on, but for the first time in years, Laura didn't feel like she had to hide from it. She felt like she could stand in it, face it, and maybe, just maybe, she could begin to rebuild. But it wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was uncertain, and Maya was right. Money, power, and status wouldn't fix her inner turmoil. Only she could do that. I'm sorry, Laura said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to make this right. Maya smiled again, but this time there was a warmth in her eyes, a recognition of something Laura hadn't seen in herself for a long time, the possibility of change. You don't have to make anything right, Maya said softly. Just make a choice. Do something real. Start there. Laura nodded slowly, the weight of Maya's words settling deep inside her. She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would. But for the first time, she felt like she was ready to start searching for them. She felt ready to listen not just to herself, but to others. To see the world through a different lens. Maya looked down at her baby and adjusted the coat, holding her a little tighter. It's going to be okay, she said quietly. One step at a time. Laura couldn't speak. Instead, she reached into her bag again and pulled out her wallet. This time, she didn't just hand over a few bills. She handed Maya everything she had in cash. Maya blinked, taken aback by the gesture. For a moment, she looked at the money in disbelief, but then her gaze shifted back to Laura. There was no judgment, just a quiet understanding. Thank you, Maya said softly, her voice full of gratitude. But remember this doesn't change anything. It's not about the money. Laura stood there, the words sinking in. She had been wrong all along. It wasn't about the money. It was about something deeper. Something real. As the rain continued to pour, Laura turned and walked away, but this time she didn't feel the rush to escape. Instead, she felt a slow shift inside her. A shift that had started with Maya, with the baby, with everything she had been running from. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. Laura was not born into wealth. She came from a small town, raised by parents who worked tirelessly just to keep the lights on. From a young age, Laura had a burning desire to change her circumstances. She watched her mother's tired eyes as she worked long hours in a factory, and her father, who came home late after long shifts at the local store. They were good people, but life was hard for them. Laura promised herself she would not end up like them. As a young woman, Laura moved to the city with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She worked in a low-paying job as a secretary at a law firm, watching people around her climb the ranks. She didn't have the luxury of waiting for opportunities to fall into her lap. She made them happen. She stayed late at the office, learned everything she could, and worked hard to prove herself. It wasn't long before she saw a crack in the door, an opportunity to climb higher. She started networking with people who could help her move up, make connections, and got involved in deals that required more skill than she had, but she learned quickly. Soon she was running her own small business. The success didn't come easily and the hours were long. But every sacrifice, every moment spent away from her family, every weekend missed with friends, seemed worth it as she saw the results. Over the years, Laura built her empire. It wasn't just the business that grew. Her reputation, her wealth, her influence all followed. But there was a price to pay. Her relationships with her family became strained. She missed birthdays, holidays, and important moments. She stopped seeing her friends. Her mother sent her messages, asking when they would see each other again, but Laura was too busy to respond. She convinced herself that she was doing it for them, so that they would never have to worry again. But deep down, she wondered if they still cared, or if they had just accepted her absence as part of who she was now. There were moments when she sat in her office late at night, staring at the glowing city lights through her window, feeling a pang of loneliness. She had everything she could have ever wanted: money, status, success, but she felt like something was missing. At the next intersection, Laura made a decision. She would stop. She quickly parked her car at the side of the street, her mind racing with questions she had no answers to. Maya was sitting on the curb, sheltering the baby under a thin blanket, her eyes downcast, unaware of Laura's approach. Laura stepped out of the car, clutching her purse. She walked toward the woman, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me," Laura said softly, her voice almost unfamiliar to her own ears. Maya looked up, her eyes wary but not surprised. She must have been used to strangers approaching her, whether for help or just to avoid eye contact. I saw you yesterday. I wanted to help," Laura said, feeling her words come out in an awkward rush. She handed Maya a few bills, not thinking about how much or how little, just that it was something. Maya looked at the money, then at Laura, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said quietly. But just as Laura turned to walk back to her car, she heard Maya's voice again. "It's not just about money, you know." The words hit Laura harder than she expected. It wasn't just about money. For the first time, Laura really saw the woman in front of her. Not just as a beggar, not just someone she could throw money at to alleviate her guilt, but as a person. As she stood there, it wasn't the money she felt she needed to give, but something deeper. Maya needed more than financial help. She needed compassion, connection, and support. The weight of that realization hit Laura with a force she couldn't deny. Money had never been enough to fill the void in Laura's own life. She had spent years accumulating wealth, thinking it would solve all her problems, but it hadn't. It had made her feel powerful, yes, but it hadn't brought her the happiness or fulfillment she craved. In that brief moment of connection with Maya, something inside Laura shifted. She realized that, just as she had been missing something all these years, so had Maya. And money alone couldn't fix it. Laura took a deep breath, her chest tight with the weight of her decision. She wasn't sure what it meant or what she was supposed to do next, but she knew one thing. She couldn't just keep living the way she had been. The frantic pace, the constant chase for more, it had to stop. She had to find balance, not just for herself, but for the people around her. For the first time in a long time, Laura realized that money wasn't everything. There had to be something more, something beyond the office and the board meetings, something real. She needed to figure out what that was. As she turned and walked back to her car, she didn't know what the future held, but for once she felt a flicker of hope. There was more to life than just her business, and maybe it was time to start looking for it. The days following Laura's encounter with Maya were unlike any she had experienced before. Her mind buzzed with thoughts of the beggar and her baby as she continued her daily routine, Meetings, calls, deadlines, but something had shifted. The relentless pursuit of success, once her entire world, felt like a distant echo. At work, Laura found herself distracted. Every time she sat in her office, surrounded by her expensive furnishings and the hum of her latest project, she couldn't stop thinking about Maya. She couldn't get the image of the woman, drenched from the rain, with her child in her arms, out of her mind. She felt something inside her stir, a deep desire to help, to do more than just give money and move on with her life. It wasn't that she hadn't donated before. Laura had written checks to countless charities and helped fund projects in impoverished areas. But this time it felt different. This time she couldn't ignore the personal connection she felt. One afternoon, when Laura finished her last meeting earlier than expected, she made a decision. She would go back to that street corner. She would learn more about Maya, about her life, and about her child. She parked her car at the same spot, her heart racing. As she stepped out and walked toward the curb, she didn't know what she expected. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, but she knew she couldn't just stand by anymore. Maya was sitting on the ground, the baby asleep in her arms, wrapped in a thin, faded blanket. She looked up as Laura approached, a faint surprise crossing her face. "Hi," Laura said softly, her voice uncertain. I wanted to check on you. I gave you some money the other day, but I feel like I should do more." Maya hesitated, then nodded slowly. Her eyes were tired, but there was something in them that spoke of resilience, of strength. "Thank you for the money," Maya said, her voice low but kind. "But I don't need charity. I just need to make sure my daughter is safe." Laura sat down beside her, feeling the cold pavement beneath her. For the first time in years, she felt connected to someone. There was no facade here, no pretensions, just two women who, despite their very different circumstances, had one thing in common. They both wanted something more from life. "What's her name?" Laura asked, her voice softening as she looked at the child. "Her name is Sophia," Maya replied, her eyes lighting up for the first time since Laura had arrived. "She's everything to me." Laura smiled. She had never seen a mother's love so pure, so unshakable. She realized in that moment that she had never truly known what it meant to be loved like that. Not in the way Maya loved Sophia. "I don't have much," Maya continued, her voice hesitant now, "but I promise you, I'll do whatever it takes to give her a better life." The weight of those words hit Laura. Maya had no wealth, no connections, but she had something far more precious: love and determination. Laura, for all her success, had spent years chasing after the wrong things. She had sought power, status, and control, but now she saw the value in something else. Over the following weeks, Laura found herself returning to Maya's corner more often. Sometimes she brought food for them both. Other times she just sat with Maya, listening to her story, learning about the struggles she faced raising Sophia alone, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Maya's life had been far different from Laura's. She had not come from a background of opportunity, and she didn't have a burning desire to prove herself in the way that Laura had. Maya's world had been about survival, about making it through each day with enough to eat, a safe place to sleep, and maybe a moment of peace. When Maya found out she was pregnant, she was terrified. She had no partner, no support system, and nowhere to turn. The father of her child, a man she thought she loved, walked out the moment he found out. "I can't do this," he said, leaving her with nothing but the baby inside her. Maya didn't have a choice but to keep going. She worked whatever jobs she could find: waitressing, cleaning, anything that would put food on the table. Every day was a struggle. Her body was tired from carrying the child, and her mind was consumed with worry. She was scared. Scared for herself, scared for her baby, scared she wouldn't be able to make it. But there was no time for fear. Maya's days were filled with work, running from one job to the next, never stopping long enough to think about what she was missing. The world passed her by and she kept pushing forward. When her daughter was born, there was no fanfare, no celebration, just a quiet room in a small clinic. But when Maya held her daughter for the first time, something changed inside her. All the exhaustion, all the fears, all the doubts, none of that mattered anymore. She had a new purpose now. Maya didn't have much, but she had love for her child. That love was the driving force that kept her going, even in the hardest times. She continued to work, juggling jobs, staying up late to care for her baby. There was no time for rest, no time to think about the life she could have had. She was determined to give her daughter a better future, no matter what it took. She made sacrifices every day, things that hurt, things she didn't want to do, but for her child she would endure anything. As Laura reflected on her own journey, she couldn't help but compare herself to others. She had spent so many years building her empire, chasing success, but now that she had it, she wasn't sure what she had gained. She was at the top, but she felt isolated, disconnected. She thought about her parents, about the way she used to watch her mother's tired face as she worked. She had promised herself she would never live like that, but now she was living a different kind of exhaustion. Her wealth had brought her success, but it had also cost her everything she had once cared about. In the quiet of her office, Laura began to wonder if there was something more to life than what she had been chasing all these years. Was it worth it? Was the price she had paid for success too high? On the other side of the city, Maya walked through the streets, her daughter nestled in her arms. She had nothing but her love for her child, but in that love she found strength. She may not have had the wealth or status that Laura had, but Maya had something that Laura lacked. The kind of love that was unconditional and pure. Maya knew she had made sacrifices too. She had given up dreams of a better life to survive, to raise her child, and every day was a fight. But she had something to hold on to, something that made it all worthwhile. And even though her future was uncertain, she knew that as long as she had her daughter, she would keep going. The parallel struggles of these two women were undeniable. Laura had given up everything for success, but found herself questioning it now. Maya had given up everything for survival, and found her purpose in the love for her child. Both women had paid a price. But one was left with questions and regret, and the other with love and a will to endure. Laura sat in her sleek, black car, the rain still pounding against the windows as she waited at the traffic light. She had just wrapped up an important meeting and was heading to her next. Her schedule was packed as it always was. Every minute accounted for, every decision a step toward more wealth, more power. It was the life she had built, and she couldn't afford to slow down now. But today something felt different. As she drove past the street corner where she had seen Maya the day before, the image of the woman with the baby in her arms lingered in Laura's mind. For a moment she considered stopping, maybe handing over some money, just enough to help her buy food for the baby. That would be the quick fix, wouldn't it? That was all the beggar needed. Money. But the thought didn't sit right with Laura. She had done this before, giving money to those in need from the comfort of her car, handing out bills through the window as if it would erase the guilt she felt. It was easy, detached, and gave her a sense of doing the right thing without disrupting her carefully constructed life. But something inside her was different now. Why did she care so much about Maya? She barely knew the woman, and their lives were worlds apart. Yet, that brief encounter had left an emotional mark. Laura couldn't push it aside, and for once she didn't want to. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. What was this feeling? Why was she struggling with this decision? She didn't have time for distractions. Her meetings, her projects, her business were the priorities. But then, what was all that success for if it didn't allow her to help others, to make a real difference? She wasn't a saint, she was no savior. She had worked hard to get to where she was, but hadn't she lost so much along the way? Her family, her friends, her peace of mind? Was this all worth it? Maya was a stranger, but something in her story tugged at Laura's heart. She couldn't just ignore it. The light turned green. Laura's foot pressed on the accelerator, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being torn between her world and the one she had just glimpsed. The beggar with her baby, her struggle, her pain, her perseverance, was a stark contrast to the world Laura inhabited. As Laura spent more time with Maya, her perspective began to shift. She learned how hard Maya worked just to survive, how every decision she made was tied to her daughter's well-being. Maya's sacrifices, her hopes for a better life, her fears of what might happen if she didn't make enough money, struck a chord with Laura. And with each passing visit, Laura's walls began to come down. She shared parts of her own life too, the loneliness she had felt despite her success, the fractured relationships with her family, the emptiness that money had failed to fill. Maya listened without judgment, offering a simple empathy that felt like a balm to Laura's weary soul. One day as they sat together in the park, Laura took a deep breath. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what I want my life to be." Maya looked at her curiously, but Laura's words came slowly, as though she were still trying to process them herself. "I've spent my whole life chasing after success, thinking it would fix everything," Laura continued. "But I've lost so much along the way. I've sacrificed relationships, peace of mind, even my own happiness for what? For things I can't take with me." Maya nodded, her expression kind but knowing. She had lived through the worst life had to offer, and yet she had something Laura envied, a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going despite it all. "I want to change," Laura said, the words finally coming freely. "I want to be more than just the money and the deals. I want to be there for you and Sophia, to help you, not out of guilt but because it matters." Maya's eyes softened as she listened. She didn't say anything at first. Instead, she reached out and touched Laura's arm gently. "You've already changed," she said quietly. "The fact that you're here, that you care, that's enough." Laura wasn't sure what it was, but something inside her clicked in that moment. She was finally seeing the world for what it was: complex, beautiful, and full of real human connections. The success, the money, the recognition. It all seemed so small compared to the bond she was building with Maya and Sophia. She had never expected this, never realized it was even possible. Laura was no longer the same woman who had driven past that street corner weeks ago. Each day, she made a conscious effort to step out of her world of deadlines and meetings and into a world where human connection and empathy came first. She found herself prioritizing Maya and Sophia more and more, even though the weight of her responsibilities never fully lifted. Maya, for her part, had begun to trust Laura. It hadn't been easy at first. Laura was still a woman of privilege, still someone who could never truly understand the struggles of living on the streets. But as they spent more time together, Maya saw the sincerity in Laura's actions. The small acts of kindness, the fact that Laura was showing up and truly listening. Those things spoke volumes. One afternoon, Laura decided to take a more active step. She had learned that Maya's situation was dire. The cramped shelter Maya and Sophia had been staying in was closing due to lack of funding. The mother and daughter would soon be back on the streets if something didn't change. Laura had enough resources to help. But more than that, she had a new perspective, a desire to do something more lasting. "I've been thinking," Laura said as she sat beside Maya on the park bench, Sophia happily playing in the grass nearby. "I think I can help you and Sophia. Not just with money but with a place to stay, with job opportunities, with stability." Maya looked at her, her brow furrowed. "I can't accept charity, Laura. I don't want to take from you, not like that." "It's not charity, Maya," Laura replied, her voice firm but gentle. "It's an opportunity for both of us. I have the means to give you a safe space to start fresh. You and Sophia deserve that. And I think this is a chance for me to build something better too." Maya stayed quiet for a long moment, as if weighing the offer. She had been let down before, by the system, by people who had promised help and never followed through. But Laura was different. She didn't come with strings attached, and for the first time, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. "I don't know what to say," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. I've never been in a position to accept something like this. But Sophia, she deserves a better life. She deserves more than this." "I know," Laura replied, her hand gently resting on Maya's. "And you deserve it too." It's not about rescuing you. It's about giving you a chance to rebuild, to have what you've always wanted. A home, a future, a life where Sophia can grow up in peace. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. The decision wasn't easy for Maya, but she understood the sincerity in Laura's words. She was taking a risk, opening herself up to someone who, until now, had been a stranger. But there was something in Laura's eyes, a depth of understanding that Maya had never expected from someone so wealthy, so removed from her world. The days following their conversation were filled with frantic preparations. Laura found an apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a place where Maya and Sophia could have a fresh start. She arranged for job interviews, helped Maya get in touch with social workers who could provide more support, and most importantly, made sure they had everything they needed to transition from living on the streets to a stable, safe environment. Laura was in constant contact with Maya, checking in regularly to see how things were progressing. She felt a surge of fulfillment each time they spoke, but there was also a nagging feeling, a fear that she might be overstepping, that she might be getting too involved. But the truth was she couldn't stop herself. The bond between them was growing stronger. One evening, as they sat in Laura's office, finalizing the details for Maya's new job, Maya looked up at Laura with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You've done so much already, Laura," Maya said softly, her voice full of emotion. "I never thought anyone would care enough to help me like this. I don't even know how to thank you." Laura smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She had given so much, but in return she had received more than she had imagined. The satisfaction of knowing that she had changed someone's life, that she had made a tangible difference, that felt better than any promotion, any deal. "Just take care of Sophia," Laura said, her voice a little shaky. "That's all I need." As the weeks went by, Laura noticed a change in herself. Her meetings, while still important, didn't consume her the way they once had. She found herself making time for other people, connecting with her estranged family, meeting friends she hadn't seen in years, and even volunteering at shelters. She was still the same successful businesswoman, but now she saw the world through a different lens. Her new focus on balance in life also led her to reassess her work environment. She began to push for more employee welfare initiatives, advocating for better mental health support and working conditions for those in her company. Her influence was no longer just about the bottom line. It was about people. And through it all, she maintained her bond with Maya and Sophia. Maya, once a woman struggling for survival, had become a pillar of strength and resilience in Laura's life. Their relationship had grown into a beautiful, unexpected friendship, one that neither of them had imagined but both of them cherished. Laura sat in her high-rise office, staring out of the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling city below. The view was breathtaking, filled with the promise of everything she had ever wanted. Endless opportunities, power, influence, and wealth. Her office was the epitome of success, a glass fortress high above the world she had conquered. Yet today, for the first time in a long while, Laura felt trapped. Her phone buzzed incessantly, each ping another update, another reminder of the ever-growing demands of her high-powered job. Contracts, deals, corporate decisions. She had built her empire one deal at a time, climbing steadily, unyielding, never pausing to question if she was truly fulfilled. The constant rush, the thrill of competition, the satisfaction of making it to the top. It had always been enough for her. But now it felt hollow. Laura reached for the phone and absent-mindedly tapped the screen. Another email, another meeting request. The usual flood of work, always clamoring for attention. She stared at the screen, but her thoughts drifted back to Maya and Sophia. The small apartment they were settling into. The bright smile on Sophia's face as she played in the park. The way Maya's tired eyes had brightened when she'd been able to take a deep breath for the first time in years. This life with Maya, with Sophia, it had changed something in Laura. It wasn't just about charity or giving them money. It was about something deeper, about human connection, about love, about balance. The moment she had walked out of her office days ago to rush to Maya's side in the middle of the night, everything had shifted inside her. For the first time, she had put someone else's needs before her own, and it had felt right. Laura stood up, pacing around her office, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her thoughts were scattered, a mixture of guilt, desire, and fear. She had been offered the promotion of a lifetime. The kind of promotion that would solidify her career, make her a major player in the corporate world. It would bring more power, more recognition, more everything she had ever thought she wanted. She had worked for this moment for years. But at what cost? A deep sigh escaped her as she ran her fingers through her hair. She remembered the frantic hours in the hospital, the fear she had seen in Maya's eyes as she clutched Sophia's tiny, feverish body. The way Maya had held on to her as if Laura were her only hope. Maya, a woman who had nothing, had trusted Laura with everything. It was humbling, and yet it terrified her. The phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. Rachel, her assistant. Laura, they're waiting for your answer. The board is getting anxious. This is your moment. You need to make a decision. Laura closed her eyes and pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to steady her racing thoughts. The decision seemed simple on the surface. Take the promotion, continue climbing the corporate ladder, and achieve everything she had worked for. But that small voice inside her, the one that had been growing louder in the weeks since she met Maya, said something different. It told her that there was more to life than money, more than success. She looked out the window again, the city lights blinking below like a sea of possibilities. Yet, as her gaze shifted from the bustling city to the quiet, peaceful image of Maya and Sophia, her heart told her exactly where she needed to be. I'm coming, Laura said, hanging up the phone before Rachel could respond. She didn't need to think about it any longer. Maya's apartment was quiet when Laura arrived. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of worry and exhaustion. Sophia, once full of life and energy, lay pale and fragile on the couch, barely able to keep her eyes open. Her tiny frame trembled with the fever that had been eating away at her strength. Maya was pacing, her face a mask of fear and helplessness. When she saw Laura, her breath caught in her throat. For a moment there was silence, a silence that spoke volumes. Laura rushed forward, placing a hand gently on Maya's shoulder. What's happening? She asked, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. I don't know what to do, Maya replied, her voice trembling. Sophia's fever, it won't go down. I don't have the money for a doctor, and the shelters, they're not an option. Laura, I don't know what to do. I can't lose her. The desperation in Maya's voice tore at Laura's heart. She had seen many people in her life, strong, capable, successful, but she had never seen someone like Maya. A woman who had been through so much yet carried herself with an unwavering determination to protect her daughter. Laura saw in Maya's eyes the kind of strength she had always admired, but it was clear that even the strongest people had their breaking points. We'll get her help, Laura said immediately, her voice full of resolve. I'm taking you both to the hospital. I'll pay for everything, whatever it takes. Maya blinked, disbelief flashing across her face. You really mean it? She whispered as if unsure she had heard right. You'll really help us? Of course, Laura replied firmly. You and Sophia are family now. We'll do this together. At the hospital, Laura's worst fears seemed to come to life. The doctors acted swiftly, rushing Sophia into treatment. Laura and Maya waited anxiously in the sterile hospital room, the clock ticking slowly in the background. The weight of the situation seemed to magnify with every passing second. The flashing lights outside the emergency room window, the beeping machines, the hushed whispers of nurses. It all felt surreal to Laura. Hours later, the doctor emerged, his face a mixture of concern and relief. She's stable for now, he said, his tone more reassuring than it had been earlier. We were able to bring down the fever, but we'll need to monitor her overnight. Maya collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. She had been so strong for so long, but now, in the safety of the hospital, she allowed herself to break down. Laura sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her back. She didn't know what else to say. Words seemed so insignificant in moments like this. As the night passed, Laura stayed by Maya's side, offering quiet support. She found herself reflecting deeply on her own life, on everything she had worked for and everything she had neglected. There was a time when she had believed success was everything. But now, standing beside Maya, watching her worry for her daughter, Laura realized that it wasn't wealth or status that defined a person. It was the love they gave, the lives they touched. The following morning, Sophia's fever had broken. She was still weak, but her color had returned, and she was finally able to rest peacefully. Maya smiled at Laura, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how I could have gotten through this without you." Laura smiled back, a warmth filling her chest. "You don't have to thank me. You've taught me more than I could ever teach you." Back in her office hours later, Laura stared at the same promotion offer once more. This time the decision was clear. Her future didn't lie in boardrooms or corner offices. It didn't lie in deals or power. It lay in her relationships, her family, her friends, and most importantly, Maya and Sophia. She picked up the phone again and called Rachel. "I'm turning down the promotion," Laura said, her voice unwavering. "I have other priorities now." That evening, Laura returned to Maya's apartment, the place that had once seemed so foreign to her, but now felt like home. Maya was there, laughing softly as Sophia played with her toys. For the first time, Laura truly understood the meaning of peace. Sophia ran up to her, still weak but eager to thank Laura. "Thank you for helping Mommy," she said, her voice filled with innocence and pure joy. Laura knelt down to embrace her. In that simple gesture, she realized that she had found her true calling. The days that followed were filled with a quiet, contented rhythm. Laura had made her decision. She had turned down the promotion, walked away from the life that had once defined her, and fully embraced the path of connection, care, and love. It felt foreign yet deeply right. For the first time, Laura felt as though she was living authentically, truly living. Maya and Sophia had settled into a new rhythm as well. The apartment, once a place of uncertainty and hardship, now felt warm, filled with laughter and the small, beautiful chaos of everyday life. Maya had found work in a local cafe doing what she loved, baking. Her face, once lined with worry, was now softer, more peaceful. Sophia, with her health restored, was back to her lively self, her giggles echoing through the apartment. Laura visited them often, more than she had ever imagined she would. Her days were no longer consumed by endless emails and meetings. Instead, she found herself spending time at the cafe, helping Maya with the shop and watching Sophia grow. She had become a part of their lives in a way she hadn't thought possible. One afternoon, as Laura walked through the city streets, she felt a strange sense of calm. The hustle and bustle of the world around her felt distant, almost irrelevant. Her life had changed in ways she couldn't have predicted, and yet everything felt right. She didn't need the accolades, the awards, the recognition. What she needed, what she had always needed, was the simple joy of being present for the people she loved. Laura walked into the cafe where Maya was working. The small bell above the door rang as she entered, and Maya looked up, her face lighting up when she saw her. "I've been thinking," Laura said, her voice steady but full of emotion, "about opening something of our own. A bakery maybe. A cafe where you can share your talents with more people. Where we can help others who are struggling just like we did." Maya stopped wiping down the counter, her eyes wide with surprise. "You want to open a bakery with me?" she asked, almost in disbelief. Laura nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "I want to help you create something beautiful. Something that's ours. Something that's more than just a job. Something that means something." Maya stood still for a moment, processing the offer. Then, without a word, she rushed around the counter and threw her arms around Laura in a hug. "You don't know how much this means to me," she whispered. Laura's heart swelled. In that moment, she understood the true meaning of partnership. This wasn't just about business. It was about rebuilding lives together, helping each other rise from the ashes of hardship. It was about creating a space where love, kindness, and generosity could flourish. As they began planning their new venture, something unexpected happened. The community around them started to take notice. The small cafe became a local hub, not just for its delicious pastries, but for the spirit of hope it radiated. Laura and Maya worked together, side by side, offering a helping hand to anyone in need. Whether it was a free meal for someone who couldn't afford it or a moment of kindness for someone going through a tough time, the bakery became a symbol of change. Sophia, as she grew older, often helped out around the cafe, handing out cookies to customers and learning the art of baking from her mother. The bond between the three women deepened with each passing day. They had created a family out of shared struggles, out of mutual respect, and out of love. One evening, as the three of them sat together after closing, enjoying a simple meal of bread and soup, Laura realized how far she had come. Her old life, with its boardrooms and corporate deals, felt like a distant memory. She had found her true purpose, not in wealth or power, but in the quiet moments of everyday life. Maya looked at her, her eyes filled with warmth. "I never thought I would be here," she said softly. "Back then, I didn't know what the future would hold. But now, I feel like we've built something beautiful." Laura nodded, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. "We have," she agreed. "We've built something real." A few months later, the bakery was thriving. Laura had helped Maya secure a small loan to expand, and they had started offering cooking classes to the community. The cafe had become more than just a business. It had become a beacon of hope. People came from all over the city, not only for the food but for the sense of belonging, the feeling that they were a part of something bigger. Laura's life had changed beyond recognition. She no longer cared about climbing the corporate ladder. She was no longer defined by her career or her wealth. What mattered now was the family she had found in Maya and Sophia, the love they shared, the lives they had touched. The final scene of the story is quiet, intimate. Maya and Sophia are sitting together, surrounded by freshly baked bread and pastries, while Laura stands by the window looking out over the city. The once overwhelming skyline now felt like a place she had conquered, not with wealth, but with love. Laura turned to Maya and Sophia, her heart full. "You know," she said softly, "we've done something special here. We found a way to live our lives, not for money or success, but for each other." Sophia smiled brightly, her eyes sparkling with the innocence of childhood. "And we're happy, Mommy. We're really happy." Maya nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Yes, we are." Laura stepped away from the window, joining them at the table. The three of them sat together, a family in every sense of the word, sharing a meal and a moment of pure joy. The world outside could wait. So what do you think? Was Laura's decision to help Maya the right one? In a world where success and wealth often seem like the ultimate goals, could the real victory lie in human connection and compassion? As Laura's life takes a new direction, we're left wondering, can a person who's built their world on ambition and control truly change, or does it take something extraordinary to shake them to their core? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Did Laura make the right choice? And how would you rate her journey on a scale from 0 to 10? If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you never miss another heartwarming tale. And if you're looking for more incredible stories about transformation and second chances, click here on the end screen to keep watching. The journey doesn't end here.